Hey friends, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we are getting ready to work up a bunch of tomatoes. This is our first big harvest of tomatoes, and it won't be our last. But today we need to stock our shelves with some spaghetti sauce. So I'm going to take a recipe from Ball and change a few spices and make it into a spaghetti sauce. This recipe is Basil-Garlic Tomato Sauce, and it is a great recipe for water bath canning and steam canning. So if you want to see how I make a few changes to make it our spaghetti sauce, stick around. Thanks for sticking around. Well, today, like I said at the beginning, this is a Ball recipe, so this is a safe canning recipe. It has been tested, and it is for basil garlic tomato sauce. And in the description box below this video, I will be putting a link to the Ball site, and you can have this recipe from there. And so this recipe uses 20 pounds of tomatoes, 1 cup of chopped onions, 8 cloves of garlic, a tablespoon of olive oil, 1/4 cup of finely minced fresh basil, and 1/4 teaspoon of citric acid or a tablespoon of bottled lemon juice per jar. So I'm kind of looking over what I have. I am going to be making this in a much larger quantity. Now you can certainly just follow this recipe, but you're only going to get 3 quarts. But if you only have 20 pounds of tomatoes, that's all you can make, and that's fine. It will also, you could also go down to 7 pints. You can put them in either pints or quarts, and they have the safe times for those. And like I said earlier, this is a safe canning method that is for water bath or steam canning. And a lot of spaghetti sauces you have to process in a pressure canner because a lot of times there are a lot of added vegetables like carrots or celery or things like that. This one doesn't have those lower acid vegetables. The only thing it does have is the garlic, the onions, and the basil. And those are all low acid, and those are hopefully going to be, if we follow the recipe right, the acid in the tomatoes and the acid that we add to the jars will make it acidic enough. So that's what I like. I would prefer to do water bath or steam canning over pressure canning if I can, because I can get a lot more done with a steam canner. I think I've talked about this in my previous videos. You can take any recipe that is a safe and tested recipe, and you can change up the spices. That doesn't affect the safeness of a recipe. You can also add sugar, take away sugar. Those are things that you can do and adjust to your taste. So what I plan on doing is adding some different seasonings as well as the ones that this already has, but that way it will give it more of the pasta sauce that I'm looking for. Now, if you've watched my videos from last year when we were preparing tomatoes, very rarely are you going to find a safe recipe using tomatoes with tomato skins on them. Now, I have made sauces in the past, and I will probably make sauces in the future with skins on. But according to the safety rules, you need to take the skins off. So that's your choice. I know a lot of people have talked about that because we leave skins on other vegetables. Why do we have to take them off of tomatoes? What is the difference? But they just say that it's been tested without the skins, so we need to follow the directions. So you choose which way you want to do it, knowing that there is a risk. Now, what I'm going to do, instead of peeling these tomatoes by putting them into the hot water bath and then the cold water bath and then peeling the tomatoes, is I'm going to go ahead and run them through a sieve. And I have a sieve that hooks up to my KitchenAid food processor, and it will strain out all the seeds and all the skins. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And with this large amount, it's easier for me to do that. Now, I still need to go in, and I still want to go in and wash all these tomatoes really good. I want to core them and cut off anything that might be a crack or any discoloration, anything that I don't want in my tomato sauce. So it's still going to be a pretty big job because you still need to prepare your tomatoes. And when you make a big batch like I'm getting ready to make, it takes a little bit of time. I also plan on putting them in a roasting pan and not using it necessarily as a roaster, but just using it as a big pot. And that way I can keep an eye on it and I can kind of go do things and then just come back and stir and keep an eye, because we are going to have to reduce this by about half. So that's something that we need to remember. It's not going to be a quick recipe. It's going to take quite a bit of time to cook down. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go clean all of my tomatoes that I'm going to use. I need to weigh them first to make sure I know how many tomatoes I'm making, and then I can adjust my measurements for what I'm making. So I'm going to measure how many pounds of tomatoes that I plan on putting into this recipe, and then washing the tomatoes, coring them, running them through my strainer, and then I'm going to bring you back. So I may even include a little shot here of how the strainer works in case you're interested in getting one. They are very nice, very nice. Okay, so I will come back after I have all of this prepared and we're ready to put it in a pan. Whenever I'm getting a large batch of tomatoes cleaned up, I try to set up a nice workstation like this. I scour my kitchen sink really good, clean it up, disinfect it. I fill my sink with cold water and place my tomatoes in the water, and then I kind of agitate the tomatoes in there to loosen up the dirt, let them set for a few minutes. Then I'll drain that batch of water off, fill it again with some clean water, and then I will start preparing them and taking off the stems and the bad spots and chunking them up the size that it takes for them to go into my strainer. Now, you're going to see that I have two big bowls, one for the scraps and one for my tomatoes, and I will be going through several bowls for the tomatoes. I think I can get most of my scraps in that one bowl. But again, there'll be some tomatoes that do have some dirt on them still, and I just am sure to wash that off nicely. And again, I'm slicing these so that they'll fit into the tube that goes into the strainer. So this is the first part, and I'll work up all of my tomatoes at once. As soon as I have all of my tomatoes clean and sliced to the right size, I assemble my KitchenAid mixer, and I first of all take off the front cap, and mine just lifts up, and remove that little bolt. Then I insert all of these pieces right there into the motor, and there's several little pieces, and that's the thing that pulls the food, and there's the strainer, and you have to make sure everything's in the correct way, and then this needs to be tightened on there very well, and that needs to be matched up with that little groove right there. And it's important that you get everything tightened so that you don't have anything coming loose on you when you're in the middle of processing these tomatoes. They have a little wrench type thing right there to tighten up that cap so that it will not leak and it will
not come apart on you during the process. And then we have this little cap that feeds the juices into a bowl, and we'll cover it so it doesn't splatter, but you can still see what it looks like inside there. And then this little attachment here I bought separately, and it just allows us to feed a larger amount of food into the strainer, and so that just goes on top. So here I'll just show you how I take the tomatoes, and you can't see them at the top there. They're just sitting in that container at the top, and I just use that wooden pusher to just get those tomatoes down into that chute. And as soon as they're down in there, they get taken in by that feeder, and the waste will come out the one end, and the juices will flow inside of that encapsulated portion, and you can see it coming out into the bowl. Now the waste is the skin and the seeds and any core parts that I did not get cut out, and you can see it's just dropping into the waste bowl. I am going to take that at the very end, and I'm going to put that through the strainer again, because depending on how many tomatoes you're running through and the speed you're running it through will depend on how much juice is still left in that waste. And you can usually get quite a bit more sauce running the waste through again. So here we are looking at what has just gone through, and there's what it looks like inside. So let's move ahead and see what it looks like after we've got that first stainless steel bowl completely run through. Here it is. All that's left in the bowl is a little bit of juice from the tomatoes. We have a big bowl of waste right there. And as you can see, it's pretty juicy still. There's a lot of skin, a lot of seeds, but we're going to run that through again. The bowl of pasta sauce looks really good, and it has a lot of pulp in there, but there's no seeds, no skins. It looks really nice. Now I'm bringing you back to show you what the pulp looks like after I've run it through the second time. And as you can see, it's quite dry now, and it's just the seeds and the skins. And then the sauce itself, you know, that extra bit of pulp out of those seeds, it just makes the sauce even better, so it's nice and thick. So I'm just going to continue with the rest of these tomatoes, and then we'll come right back.
Okay, we're back. I have my tomatoes all strained. Now I want to explain something to you. In this recipe, what they have you do is wash tomatoes, drain, remove core and blossom ends, cut into quarters, set aside. And you know, we did all of that and got them all clean. Then it wants you to saute the onion and the garlic in a little bit of olive oil that they have in this recipe. And you do that until they're transparent. Then you're going to add your tomatoes, and they still at that point have the skins on them. They have the seeds and everything on them. And you take those tomatoes and your garlic and your onions that have been sauteed, and you bring those to a boil or just get them nice and soft. Well, actually, they have you simmer them for 20 minutes. Then they have you run it through a food processor. Then they have you take and strain the puree in small batches so that you get the seeds and the skin out. Now, we did not do it that way today, but if you don't have a KitchenAid or a strainer of some sort that's electric, you might need to do it this way. What we did was we just cleaned our tomatoes, took the ends off, took out the core, cut them into quarters, and then I fed them through our KitchenAid strainer, and it produced this great juice and sauce. Now, I have not sauteed my onions and my garlic. I can do that and it's going to taste really, really good. But I am just going to throw mine directly into my pots. This is the way I usually do it, and just let it cook in there. Because what I do a lot of times is I will take a hand blender after it's all cooked and I will just puree it up if there's chunks in there that I want to smooth out. So if this doesn't get cooked down to nothing, then I will puree it with a hand blender. So that's my plan. Now, another thing that you could do if you did not want to strain it, you could go ahead and peel your tomatoes with the boiling water method, and then you could chop them up or put them in a blender and puree them up, and then cook the sauce from there. You will have seeds in it, but if seeds don't bother you, that's fine. Seeds never bother me, but the strainer takes them out on the KitchenAid mixer. So these are seed and skin free. So again, I'm not sauteing my onions and I'm not sauteing my garlic. I'm just gonna cook it in this sauce. So it says about 1 large onion per 20 pounds of tomatoes. And I had over 60 pounds. So I just took 3 of our large onions, and I guess our large onions are quite a bit larger than their large onion. And I just chopped it up into just a coarse chop, and I'm just going to put it in, and I haven't decided, I think I'm just going to put it in this right here and pour it in, because this is going to end up going in there anyway. So I don't think I'll mess with putting anything in this one. And then it said to take per 20 pounds of tomatoes, 8 cloves of garlic and mince it. So of course I have times 3. And if you want to add some more, that's fine. You know, the ingredients are kind of loosely measured because, you know, 1 clove of garlic may be huge or it may be small, so whatever you like to taste. If you don't want any garlic in your sauce, don't put it in. So it's just up to you. It's gonna have a different taste, but if you don't like those things, then there's no sense in putting it into your spaghetti sauce. And now I'm getting ready to work on mincing up my fresh basil, and I need a fourth of a cup of finely minced basil for each 20 pounds of tomatoes. So I just got my fresh garlic out of the garden. I rinsed it off, and now what I'm going to do is I am just going to pull off the leaves. I'm not going to use the stems, and I'm going to stack them up. Just make a stack of the leaves like this, and then I just roll those leaves up. Just like that, okay? I don't know if you can see, there we go. And then I just take my knife and I just very finely slice that roll. And then I go the other way. And you do need a sharp knife. So when I am finished, I have about this texture. Now this is going to cook down, and if you don't like that big of a piece of basil, cut it finer. I am going to be using my hand blender at the end, and it will chop it up really fine. So it's up to you how fine you chop your basil. But I'm going to need at least, let's see, 3/4 cup since I had 60 pounds. So I will get that, and then I'm going to be putting these on the stove and in the roaster, and I'm just going to turn them to a temperature that I can maintain and keep an eye on without any lids, because you want the moisture to evaporate. And I'm just going to be cooking those several hours. Now, there was no salt in this recipe. I'm going to be putting salt, but I'm not going to be putting salt yet. I'm also going to be adding herbs and spices and some sugar. I'm not adding that yet either. Right now, my goal is to cook down this sauce, get those onions cooked down nicely too, get the basil cooked down and get all of that all mixed together. And then I will start testing it and tasting it and adding my spices to my taste. So I will bring you back after this is all cooked down. Now, as you notice, there is no lime juice, citric acid, or vinegar in this right now. And we have added some non-acidic things to our tomato sauce. But after we put it into jars, we are going to add a tablespoon or a teaspoon of an acid, whether it's citric acid, lemon juice, vinegar, any of those things, and that will give it just a little bit more acidity to make sure that it is safe to can on a steam canner or in a water bath. So don't worry about that. All we have right now is just tomatoes, onions, and garlic, and basil. And if you don't like basil, don't use it. It won't be garlic, basil, tomato sauce, but if you're just wanting a spaghetti sauce and you don't like basil, don't use it. All right, I'll bring you back when it's cooked down. Hey guys, we are back. Now, in full disclosure, this is the next day. Yesterday when we were making this, I was also processing other things while this cooked down. And by the time I finished getting everything else processed, and this was at the stage that we could start canning it up, I just thought, okay, I've got 2 more canners to go with this, and each one has got to process 40 minutes, plus the time it takes to heat it up, plus the time we give it to rest. And I knew I was going to go through 2 batches, and I just did not have that in me last night. So this morning, we are going to get this finished and onto our pantry shelves really soon. So what I have here is the tomatoes that have been cooking down. Now I will tell you, the pan that was on the stove cooked down to half really quickly. Anytime you're cooking in a big roaster pan, there's a lot of liquid in here and it's going to take a little longer. Also, with my roaster pan, and yours may be the same, I find that if I turn it up too high, it starts burning around the edges. And so I've got to keep it at a temperature that I don't get burning on it. And so, you know, if I have it at 350, it's still, I have to really watch it and kind of scrape down the sides. So this cooked down, and by evening, like I said, it was ready. And it really wasn't that long because by the time I got this on the stove, it was probably 2 o'clock already. So it's not like it was cooking all day. But I didn't want to leave it in this all night, and I didn't want to cool it down and put it in the refrigerator because that would take forever. So I just took this insert with the tomato sauce in it and I stuck it in my oven, and I just turned my oven to 250, and I just and my oven runs a little bit cooler than most ovens, and I just let it set in there all night, and it reduced gradually. Not a whole lot because it wasn't boiling furiously or anything, but it would have a bubble here and there. And so it stayed at it stayed at boiling temperature, but it just didn't overcook. I didn't want it to overcook in the night. I didn't want to keep it in this because I just don't trust these plug-in cookers enough to just leave them overnight without watching them. Just me. You know, the same thing sometimes with crock pots. That worries me a little bit, but I know crock pots you should be able to leave and go to work and come back to them, but sometimes it's a little worrisome because you hear about sometimes accidents occurring with them. So I just opted to stick the whole thing in the oven, and I didn't worry about it. And so I just pulled it out, stuck it in here, and as you can see, it's piping hot still, and it has thickened up nicely. Now, there are still chunks of translucent onions and a few little slivers of basil and stuff. And you could definitely just leave it like this, but I'm going to go ahead and whir it up after we add our seasonings and spices. Now, right now, I tasted this and it just tastes like plain tomato sauce with some seasonings, but not much. There's no salt, there's no sugar, there's only onions and basil and garlic, and it doesn't taste like much. If you were to use this, if you canned it up like this, like they say, it is just in a very basic form. You would have to fix something and add it to something in order for it to be, well, in my opinion, palatable. Because it's just like opening a can of tomato sauce. You know, you're just not gonna throw that on your spaghetti, just a plain tomato sauce. It needs other seasonings. And this doesn't even have salt, so it doesn't even taste like tomato sauce. So we're going to get it fixed up to be a spaghetti sauce. So one thing that I want to share with you is we are going to be adding Italian seasoning. Now, you can use the store-bought Italian seasoning in the spice jars where it's just the herbs ground up, and that's fine. Do not use a spaghetti mix, because those mixes usually have a thickener in it, and you don't want to can anything with those thickeners. It will make it no longer a safe, tested recipe. That will change things. If you want to make your own, it's really easy, and I have a video right here of me making this, and it's from the Ball book also, and it's great to have on hand for other things as well. So let me just show you this video real quick on how to make this Italian seasoning, and if you don't want to know how to do that, just fast forward and you'll be right back with me. So here's this video. Okay, so I have my tomato sauce cooking down, and I thought that I would bring you back and we would make an Italian spice blend. Now, this mixture is from the Ball Home Preserving Cookbook, the complete book of home preserving, and I'll put a link to this book. It's a great book to use for canning, especially if you're a beginner and you want to know some of the basic stuff, but it's got every kind of recipe you really need, and it's a great book. So I'll put a link to this in the description box below the video. So in their book, they have different tomato sauces that you can make, and herbed tomatoes and stuff like that. And they share some spice blends that you can add to your tomatoes or whatever you're making to spice those up. So there's an Italian spice blend, there's a Mexican spice blend, and there's a Cajun spice blend. And so we're going to make up the Italian spice blend. So this recipe calls for basil, thyme, oregano, rosemary, sage, garlic powder, and hot pepper flakes are optional. And there's different amounts that are used. Now, I've seen all of those ingredients in a spice blend, and they all have the same equal amount, 2 teaspoons, 2 teaspoons, 2 teaspoons, and that's fine too. This one, it does show certain ones are more, they add more of some herbs than others, so it's really your taste. So I'm just going to follow the recipe that we have right here, and they have it for 2 jars and they have it for 6 jars, and it says use 2 1/4 teaspoons of spice blend for each pint, and that's if you're making like your tomatoes and stuff like that. I'm just going to be using this spice blend as an Italian seasoning, and I will add it to my whole batch and taste it and see how much I need to add. So my batch is pretty big, so I think I am going to change the 6 jars, and instead of using teaspoons as the unit, I'm just going to use tablespoons because it'll be the same ratio. So I'm going to do 4 tablespoons of basil, 2 tablespoons of thyme, 2.5 tablespoons of oregano, 1.5 tablespoons of rosemary, 1.5 tablespoons of sage, 1 tablespoon of garlic powder, 1 tablespoon of hot pepper. So I think that will be good. So let me set this book aside, and I'll either link, if I can find it online, I'll link you to this recipe, or I'll have it at the end of this video. Okay, so the first thing we need is our basil. And if you've been watching my channel for long, you know that I usually freeze my basil because it tastes better and more fresh. But there are times when you do need, like for an Italian seasoning mix, you do need to have dried basil. And so in order to keep it as flavorful as I can, I keep it whole leaved. After I dry it, I just keep them as whole leaves. And then I can crush them up in my hand and drop them in whatever I'm making. Or if I'm making a seasoning mix, I'm going to use a little coffee grinder and go ahead and grind those down. So let me just grab a nice big handful there. And we'll see how much this makes. This is probably not enough. And actually, I won't probably need as much of the basil because we've already got the fresh basil in our recipe. So I'll just use whatever this is. And I just kind of pulse it. And that's what it looks like right now. I'll go a little bit finer. There we go. And let's see what we have. Oops, and that's a little more than 1, 2. That would be 3 tablespoons. It calls for 4 tablespoons, but I'm good with that since we have so much basil and fresh basil. And when you grind that up, I can smell the basil, and it does have still a good smell. Now, if you grind it beforehand, what I find is it loses its flavor and its potency pretty quickly. So I just like to keep it in leaves and in a sealed jar. And there we go. So there is my basil. Next thing I need is 2 tablespoons of thyme. And I don't grow my own thyme. And I think I'm just going to add, I'm not a big fan of thyme. I think I'm just going to do 1.5. It's good, but it can be overpowering sometimes. So it's, again, when you're making this, if there's an herb or seasoning that you don't like, you can adjust it. Then we need oregano, and I do have some oregano that I've already mixed up, but I'm going to use some of this since it'll be fresher. And this is from last year still, but it's in great shape. And I need 2.5 tablespoons of oregano. So let me pour in. And I like a lot of oregano. That's one of those big Italian flavors. Oops, I gotta lock this down. Okay. Okay, let's see if that's good. Ooh, dusty. That looks good. And I said 2.5 tablespoons. Whoops, there's 1, 2.5. Well, that worked out just perfect. 2.5 tablespoons.
Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now we need 1.5 tablespoons of rosemary, and I've already got my rosemary fairly chopped up, ground up. Still has a little bit of texture, which is fine. And I just put a little silica gel package in those that are for food, and that just keeps my herbs fresh, especially if I've done them myself, just to make sure there was no moisture in it when I put them in. So here's 1 tablespoon, and I think I said 1.5, didn't I? Yes, and I like rosemary, so we'll just follow that. There we go. We also need 1.5 tablespoons of sage, and I do have some whole leaf sage, but sage tends to keep its flavor pretty well. And I have some ground here, and I tell you, sage is so funny looking when it's ground. It looks just like an insulation or something. Just those fuzzy leaves. So 1.5 tablespoons. There we go. We also need 1 tablespoon of garlic powder, and I'm actually using granulated garlic. That's usually what I get instead of the powder. And if you like more, you can add more. And then optional is your hot pepper flakes, 1 tablespoon. I'm going to add that. I like that flavor in our spaghetti sauce. But of course, if you don't have to add it, or you can add less. I don't know if I had quite enough in there. Okay. Now, I noticed this did not have parsley, and I do like parsley in my Italian seasoning, and I don't know if very many of the Italian seasonings have that. But I am going to mix up some parsley and put it in there too. And again, I have some that is just from last year that's nice and dry. And whatever that is, we'll add. Parsley is such a mild herb that, you know, you could use quite a bit of it. See what we got here. I am putting in, mine didn't grind up real good. What I'm going to do is I'm also going to grind all of this when I'm done, just to get it all nice and fine. So there's 1, 2, just about 2 tablespoons. A little stick there, or stem, I guess I should say. So I'm going to take this now that I have everything in there, and I'm going to go ahead and put it back in my grinder. And this is just going to get it nicely incorporated and everything kind of the same size. You can certainly leave it this way, and that's fine. But I'm going to do mine this way. Okay. So let's put that in here. And let's give it a whir. There we go. And that is what my seasoning mix is going to look like. So I can put it in a jar and it will stay nice and fresh. And I can use it for any time that we are making spaghetti sauce, pizza. I can add it to olive oil for a dip, sprinkle it on French bread, any of those things where you need a little Italian seasoning mix, and that's fine. So there's how you make our Italian seasoning mix.
All right, so I hope that you got that information, and this does smell really good. and it smells like an Italian spaghetti factory. And I will tell you, this morning, waking up to the smell of roasting tomatoes smelled really good too. But like I said, the sauce doesn't taste like anything. It doesn't have any seasonings. It's just very bland. So we're gonna spice this up. So now I have about triple the batch, maybe more. And so you're going to have to season yours up to what you like. There's not really any specific measurements. So you're gonna have to taste and decide if it's the taste that you like, because we all have our different opinions on what spices we like and what flavors we like. So I'm going to taste this or season it and taste it to my preference. And this is the way I cook. And as you can see, I do a lot of tasting. So let's take, and I'm just gonna give you estimates and then we're gonna taste it. Here's a heaping tablespoon, there's 2, and there's 3. Let's just see what that tastes like. Now, before I do any other tasting though, and this is still on because we want to incorporate those flavors and blend them in. Before we do any more tasting, I need to add salt, and I want to add a little bit of sugar. Now, you certainly don't have to add sugar, but I find that it cuts some of that tomato acid. Now, I don't mind acidity, but there's something with the tomato acid that is just, I like to mellow it out. It just mellows it out and tastes good. Because I certainly do like vinegar and I do like lemon juice, and that doesn't bother me. But that tomato acid, if it's not flavored correctly, it's just not doing anything for me. So we're gonna first of all add some salt. And again, you'll check with your recipe because mine is a triple batch. So I'm gonna add, there's a tablespoon, and I am using canning salt. You can use sea salt or kosher salt or canning salt, but I would stay away from the table salt that's iodized, because, or just plain table salt, because usually there's something in there to keep it from clumping. So I think I used a tablespoon and some more. And again, I'm just stirring. Then I'm going to add, and I'm going to start with a fourth of a cup, and this is a triple batch, so yours, actually I'm going to do half a cup because I can see that this is a large batch, and we do like to have a bit of a sweetness to our tomato sauce. Now I'm thinking mine should make about 9 jars, depending on if I cooked it down longer or not. I don't know. It has reduced by half. It may be reduced by a little more, but I don't know. It doesn't seem to have done more, so we'll see what the outcome is, because it's always hard to know for sure how many jars you're going to get, even though the recipes state that you're going to get 3 per batch. You just never know. There's too much fluctuation in this recipe. I am also, just like I said, I didn't care for the acidity in the tomatoes, but I love the taste of balsamic vinegar. And this is an acid, so you can safely add it to your recipe. In fact, it'll make it even a little safer to can. So I'm gonna add a 1/4 cup of balsamic vinegar. If you're only making a small batch, probably a tablespoon. Or 1 batch, I should say, a tablespoon. But I'm gonna add a 1/4, and this is just a balsamic vinegar, and it's just got some good flavors. Just a richness in there. Now, all of these things that we've added so far are safe to add. You can add these to any canning recipe and it stays safe. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do before I taste it is I'm going to go ahead and whir this up. And I've just got my hand blender, and I am going to plug this in and get it nice and smooth. So I will mute this because you don't want to hear this thing whirring. Got mine down to the texture I want. Now, if you have a hand blender, but it's plastic, you need to check and make sure it's safe for boiling hot tomato sauce. I always buy the metal hand blenders just because I know I use them in hot sauces or hot soups or hot puddings. So let's get this and taste it. So let me just put a little bit in this bowl. It's really a nice consistency now. Makes a big difference. Maybe a little more salt, but the herbs really come through. I am going to add some pepper to this. I forgot to bring that over. I want to add some pepper. I like to have pepper in my spaghetti sauce too. Let me add some more salt. And you can always salt after you open your can too. And this is about a half a tablespoon. I think I'm gonna add just a bit more sugar, just to cut. There's just a little bit of tartness there that I can still taste. So there's a heaping tablespoon and a heaping tablespoon. And let me grab the pepper. And I don't know, a teaspoon and a half, maybe more. Whatever your liking is for pepper. And I'm just gonna whir this with this so that it gets mixed well. That salt helped. That's good. I think that did it. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna let this simmer just for about 10 or 15 more minutes, just to let those herbs incorporate a little bit more. And then I'm gonna taste it again. And then I think we'll be ready to can it up. So I will bring you back when we're ready to can. Okay, I think I have everything laid out. It's been about 10-15 minutes that this has had a chance to just incorporate, and I tasted it and it tastes great. I think I want to add just some more red pepper flakes because we like it to have a little bit more spunk. The Italian seasoning mix that we made had a little bit, but I'm gonna add just a bit more. So that's one thing I'm gonna add, and I'm not going to puree it down. I'm just gonna sprinkle them in. So let me grab that. And mine may have not been that potent too. I'm going to add about 1.5 teaspoons. Just, that's our taste. A little bit of spunk to it. And it's not going to be hot and burn your mouth type stuff. It's just gonna say, that's got a little kick to it back there. So that will be good. Now, I don't know if I said, but whenever you're choosing your tomatoes, this, you can use any tomatoes. If you don't use paste tomatoes, it's just going to be a longer time to thicken up. I used about half paste type tomatoes, and so that makes this a real nice sauce. And I don't know if you saw, but I also had the yellow tomatoes, and I had some red ones, and I had some pink ones. So I had an assortment. I was just using everything that I was picked and harvested. But we do plant a lot of the paste type because I do make a lot of sauces and salsas. So now we're ready. So what I've got is my jars setting out here. Remember, you don't need to have sterilized jars. I've just pulled them out of my hot sink, or a sink full of hot water and soap, and you'll need a funnel. I have a skewer here for debubbling. Again, we're going to either add citric acid or lemon juice, and I'm choosing lemon juice because I like the flavor of it with the tomatoes. And I think that's all we need. So we're gonna jar this up. It says that we need to give it a 1/2 inch headspace. So let's do that. And we're going to be adding a tablespoon of lemon juice to each pint jar. So 2 tablespoons of lemon juice to each quart jar. And if you were using citric acid, it's a 1/4 of a teaspoon for a pint, a 1/2 of a teaspoon for a quart. And I've got citric acid, but I just prefer the lemon taste with my tomatoes. Now, you can do quarts, pints, and you can even do smaller jars if you want, like for pizzas or something. That would be fine. If you're using it for a pizza sauce, you do want to make sure it's fairly thick. This would be a fine thickness for a pizza sauce. So I'm just going to ladle this in and give it a 1/2 inch headspace. And I usually give it a little shy of what they say, just to keep it from siphoning. And usually I'll give it 1 inch because I'm going to be adding lemon juice too. So I will not go all the way up to the 1/2 inch. And this smells really, really good. If you hear thunder, we're having a little thunderstorm this morning. So you might hear the rumbling in the background. And we can use the rain. It's been probably a wetter late summer than it was spring, because spring we didn't have quite as much moisture as we usually do. So it's kind of nice to get this rain later in the summer. Everything's just really green. And it's just rumbling. Not doing too much rain-wise right now. It was doing a nice shower earlier. Okay, it looks like I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 jars. And I've got some still in here because I want to add my lemon juice and then top them off. So it's coming pretty close. So I guess my measurements were pretty close. So I think I said 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. 1. And the reason they're adding this lemon juice is because they want to ensure that the acidity is high enough for processing with the water bath method. Now, if you don't like to add vinegar or lemon juice to your tomato sauce, you'll need to find a recipe that is for pressure canning, and there's several out there. You can check the Ball site or the USDA site. They have tomato sauce that you can pressure can. And I know there are people who say, well, I don't add it to mine and mine's fine. I understand that, and that's fine with me too. But like I told you on my series, I want to make sure that I share safe tested recipes, or at least let you know if it is not a safe tested recipe, so that you can make that decision on your own. Whoops, that one got too much. Okay, now we are going to stir or debubble. And then I'll top it off with whatever we need. Now when you process these and you put them on your shelf, you may notice separation, and that's completely normal. It may look like the top is the tomatoes and there's a little bit of water at the bottom, and that's completely normal. It's just the tomatoes separating, and just shake that up and you'll have it back together. But don't be worried that you did something wrong if that happens. And I think it depends on how thick your sauce is, or, you know, the type of tomatoes too. Okay, so I need to top these off with a little bit more. And here's where I don't use my funnel anymore. So I'm gonna have to be sure to wipe my lids very well. And I know my funnel has a gauge on it, but it's just hard to see. So I like to see it by eyeballing it. I think that looks good. Now let's clean the rims. I just use a little bit of white vinegar. Let me grab a paper towel, and I just dip it in the vinegar and then wipe my rims. Now you want to check and make sure there's no cracks or chips on that rim. If there are, it will not seal. Now when I finish canning, and after they've set for 24 hours, I usually like to let them set till the next day, the same time I canned them. I then take off the rings, make sure that the lids are sealed well, and I wash the jars in hot sudsy water. I just spray some, it's actually the Dawn spray, on the jar, use my dishcloth, wash really well around these rings here. That way, if any food got in there, it won't mold on us while it's on our pantry shelves. We store most of our canned goods in our basement, and it can sometimes get a little more humid down there than upstairs. And so with that humidity, if I have food on my jars, it will start molding. And it won't affect what's inside, but it sure doesn't look very nice, and you do want to clean it really well before you open your jar to make sure it doesn't get into your product. So just wash them really good. Okay, those look good. I need my lids. Okay, and all you need to do with your lids is just wash them in hot sudsy water. They will be sterilized in the process of canning. And I am using my steam canner, and I think my steam canner, I haven't used it for quarts or a bunch of quarts this year. I've just been using pints or a few quarts, but I think the capacity is 7 quarts. I think it's 8 pints and 7 quarts, if I'm right. And so I will be doing this, probably one batch will have 4, one batch will have 5, just to even it out like that. So if you haven't watched my other canning tutorials, I do talk about my steam canner, and I really like it. If you are a water bath canner and you are getting tired of filling that big pot with water and making sure you have the water at the right level and waiting for it to come to boil, you need to look into a steam canner, because they are wonderful. They just seem to make it so much easier, and I just really like it. So I don't work for any steam canning company. I'm not advertising for them. I'm just saying, as one canner to another, it is a great product. And I've not had any problems with it for the years that I've been using it. Again, I can't remember if it's 5 years, 6 years, something like that. But I will put a link for one if you'd like to see the one that's being made that's similar to mine. They have just a different dial now, which I think is probably an improvement over the dial that I have. It's just mine is just a little harder to read. But they are 100% safe, and they are considered a safe way of canning. The steam gets hotter than the boiling water, so. And just checking, fingertip tight, that looks good. These are ready to go in, and when I started canning, right before I turned the camera on, I turned my steamer on, my steam canner on, and since it only has to heat up about that much water, it's already ready to put these jars in. And one thing about a steam canner, there's a certain amount of time that is a maximum for canning, and I can't remember if it's 45 minutes or exactly what, but I so far have not had anything that has gone over the maximum. And the reason they have a maximum is because it only holds so much water, and they don't want you to run out of water in your canning process. It's not like you can lift up the lid and fill it up again, because once you lift up the lid, the temperature changes and it's basically getting it back to heat again. So I'm going to put these in and let them process for 40 minutes. Then after 40 minutes, I will turn my stove off and just let them set in the steam canner undisturbed. And then after 10 minutes, I'll slowly lift the lid and just be careful so you don't get burned with the steam. And then I'll put them on the counter with a canning mat on it. If you don't have a canning mat, a towel, something that will buffer. And that's all there is to it. The reason we let it rest for 10 minutes is just to help prevent some siphoning. So that usually helps with my siphoning. So there's how we make this delicious. And again, the recipe is, let me get the name right, Basil-Garlic Tomato Sauce, but we turned it into spaghetti sauce. And again, the recipe will be in a link in the description box below. So thanks for joining me. I hope you learned something today, and I hope you get to try this recipe. If you enjoy my channel and you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate that. I do the cooking and the sewing, and I try to put at least one video out of cooking and one video out of sewing each week. So that way all of my viewers have something to watch. And so I really appreciate your comments, your kindness, and all of your views. So thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you back here soon. Bye-bye.